very nice. It's got some.
Hello and welcome to another high-octane episode of Full Throttle on Unprecedented TV, the show that puts the pedal to the metal on the issues that matter, from the war on drivers to the fight against the nanny state. I'm Paul Naylor, Director of Communications for the Alliance of British Drivers.
Hi, I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers. Today we're revving up the conversation on a massive win for freedom, UK government's humiliating backtrack on mandatory digital IDs. No more forcing every worker to sign up for Big Brother's tracking app just to earn a living.
That's right, Brian. After Starmer's bold claim last September that you won't work without digital ID, the Labour lot have slammed on the brakes. Thanks to the public outrage, petitions hitting millions, and sheer common sense finally prevailing, it's now optional. But is this a real victory or just a pit stop before they try again?
We're diving deeper into why this happened, what it means for your privacy, and how it ties into the bigger picture of government overreach. Think surveillance, net zero nonsense, and the erosion of our rights on the road and beyond.
And joining us is a true freedom fighter and fellow unprecedented TV star, Basil Valentine, host of Countdown with Basil Valentine. Basil's no stranger to calling out the globalist playbook, and he's got the inside track on this digital ID debacle and much more.
Okay, folks, buckle up. It's time to go full throttle.
And here he is. Hello,
welcome,
Basil.
Thanks very much for joining us on Full Throttle.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you both.
And you, sir, and you. So, Basil, just let the audience know a bit more about yourself if they haven't had the pleasure to see you before.
Well, I was originally recruited by Patrick Henningson of 21st Century Wire and Sunday Wire to join him on his weekly podcast. That was over 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we then came to the attention of a certain Mike Ryan, who may be familiar to some of our listeners, of course, was the head honcho at Today's News Talk.
Yeah.
So I joined the TNT team and eventually became political editor and had a 2-hour program every night until, unfortunately, the funding was plugged before the agreed deadline. And since then, I went back and did a few shifts for The Pulse. I'm also now a regular on a UK column. In fact, I'll be on UK column tomorrow at 1:00 with Patrick Henningson and Mike Robinson. And then I'm doing lots more other stuff as well, including this. So great to be with you.
Keep him busy.
Great. Excellent. Okay, well, let's open this unsavory can of worms that is digital ID. What is your take on whether or not what we heard yesterday is actually the climb down? Is it a victory, or are they just sort of hit the pause button while they do stuff in the background, continuing in the general direction of sort of making us all
slaves.
Rightless slaves of the state. Yeah.
Well, let's take the win first of all. Okay. Usually, although we're supposed to live in a democracy, we really live in an elected dictatorship.
Yes.
Starmer, uniquely unpopular. The vagaries of our electoral system mean that a government was elected by roughly 1 in 7 adults in Britain. Absolutely extraordinary. If you include the number of people not only who didn't vote, but who are not on the electoral register, then the 1 in 3 that actually voted for Starmer becomes 1 in 6 when you include those who didn't vote but are on the electoral rolls, a very low turnout.
Yeah.
And more like 1 in 7 when you include the people that are not on the electoral roll. So it's absolutely ridiculous that any UK government considers that to be a mandate to do all sorts of things that, you know, irrevocably change the fabric of our national and social life. You know, they're also wanting to build all over the green belt, something that can never be undone. And of course, you know, digital ID, the idea that any subsequent government, although Reform have made noises about not being in favour of digital ID. And in fact, 1 or 2 of their MPs have been amongst the most vocal, Richard Tice in particular. Nevertheless, I wouldn't trust any government to roll back digital ID if it was introduced, because governments don't tend to give up power when they've got it. So was it the 3 million signatories to the online petition? Who knows? I mean, that is a particularly large number of signatories.
It certainly is. It's even more than the 2 million, 1.8 million that ABD got with the first anti-road pricing petition quite a few years ago now. But 3 million is very significant.
Yeah.
And if that was one of the factors, then there's only one reason why the government would have changed course, and that is MPs, including ministers, acting entirely out of self-interest, because they'd really like to continue their well-paid sinecures for another 5 years after the next general election. And almost everything they've done since being elected has been hugely unpopular. So they didn't really need another enormously unpopular policy that had the potential to become this government's poll tax and conceivably bring it down. So, you know, if this is to be a permanent U-turn, you know, let's not forget Tony Blair tried to bring in ID cards in the early part of this century, if you remember. There's a nasty authoritarian streak in this so-called New Labour. He failed. This attempt appears to have failed. And we have to be very watchful that it's not going to be brought in via the back door. You know, whether that's, you know, a new type of passport that also includes digital ID. People say, oh, well, it's just a different type of passport now. And, you know, that will include a QR code on your passport. And then suddenly you're required to produce your passport to all sorts of places within the UK. Who knows? You know, perhaps,
I think we've got a video of Rupert Lowe celebrating the government announcement on digital ID. So let's just have a quick look at that.
Good news. Keir Starmer has just announced he's abandoned plans to implement compulsory digital ID. I think this is hugely good news for all of us. It shows what can be achieved when sensible MPs get together and with public support make their views known. Nearly 50 MPs signed my open letter to Keir Starmer on this subject, to which we were implacably opposed. And I think we can say this is a victory for common sense. It's a victory for all of us. And we can safely say now that we retain our freedom. Another slice of it has not passed to an oppressive nanny state. We've got 3 more years to go, and we must collectively use this as the template to fight the nonsense that's being peddled and promulgated in this country now. So well done, everybody. Have a large drink to celebrate this evening.
I'm sure many of us did.
He doesn't really look like he's celebrating there, Rupert, though.
No,
he struggles to raise a smile, doesn't he? But it's interesting. He referenced the open letter he wrote, which was signed by 50 MPs, because it included amongst the signatories Jeremy Corbyn. So this issue really did unite people in a way that very few can do. I should think it's probably just about the only thing that Rupert Lowe and Jeremy Corbyn agree on, other than that the sky is blue and water's wet, you know. So you know, the demonstrations, there were only a couple. I was slightly surprised that the numbers at those demonstrations weren't bigger than they were, but it was early days, put it that way.
Yes.
And I think if the government had pressed ahead with this, then we would have seen progressively larger and more frequent demonstrations. But bear in mind, this government are bringing in some new legislation to tackle what they call the cumulative effect of demonstrations. In other words, they don't want people protesting about the same thing over and over again, believe it or not, which, of course, that has to be combated. I don't trust anyone, with one or two exceptions in this government, any further than I can throw them. I think they're a thoroughly disgraceful bunch. I really do. I mean, if we go back 40 or 50 years, personally, I think Margaret Thatcher did a huge amount of damage to this country with privatization and various other policies. But at least her cabinet were reasonably well educated and could pass for gentlemen. I think the Labour government, the much derided Labour government of 74 to 79, included people like David Owen and Jim Callaghan, who were tremendously talented politicians. Dennis Healey as well, and it was a shame that the Labour Party was so divided. But that government was actually much more effective than it's given credit for by the history books. Since then, the Blair years onwards, the caliber of individuals in government has continued to deteriorate to the point where now we have these self-serving popinjays who do not crucially represent the people who elected them. They get in on a party ticket and then that's it, completely disassociate themselves, with a few exceptions, of course, from the people who voted them in. And you only get a chance to get rid of them once every 5 years.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, yeah. So, I think this is not just a win for democracy, but a win for the British people as well. I hope we can do the same with some of the other awful things that this government's trying to do.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing, Basil, is that nothing in their manifesto mentioned any of these policies. In fact, the manifesto was bland. It was like I'm trying to think of a suitable description. It was like a tasteless chocolate mousse, if you like, almost. It was just. And then once they got in, then suddenly they seemed to, all these policies came out of the woodwork that had they told us as the electorate, even the tiny percentage who voted would have said, well, we're not having any of that. And of course they didn't. They just said as little as they could to make sure they didn't fumble the ball, so that they get this massive majority, which doesn't reflect, as you say, the views of the country as a whole. Nothing like it reflects the views of policy wonks in Whitehall and the hard left Labour. Hard left, far right. It doesn't really matter. They're the same thing. That just believes command and control, and that the individual is, as I said, the rightless slave of the state.
Yeah, I think their buzzword in the election was changed. It was just change. We're not the other lot. We're going to be a change, Simple as that. Rather like the spookily named Tony Blair Institute for Global Change.
Yes.
Doesn't tell you anything at all about what they actually want to do,
No.
But, there is still going to be more battles to be won, because the tech bros, particularly in America, the likes of Palantir, are already getting their tentacles into aspects of the UK state. We've just signed the biggest deal, £240 million with any company. I can tell you a little bit about it here, actually. The MOD just signed this deal with Palantir, who, of course, were one of the candidates for handling the data of any digital ID. This is really newspeak. A technology company with close ties to the Trump administration has cemented its role analysing data for the UK's military. In December, the MOD directly awarded American data and AI company Palantir a £240 million agreement for, and here's the newspeak, data analytics capabilities supporting critical strategic tactical and live operational decision-making across classifications. Did you get that?
Yeah, it doesn't tell you anything really about what they're planning to do. And of course, Palantir are also big in the United States. You know, the only saving grace is they're not Chinese. If that is a saving grace.
Yes, I'm sure we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it doesn't mean this doesn't mean that they're not going to go for a central bank digital currency.
No.
Or some other way of programming money, particularly for benefits claimants, so that they can only use it to spend on certain things.
Yeah.
So, and again, some people would say, oh, well, that's all right. Should benefits claimants bet on horses or buy tobacco? But, again, it's
we all know that mission creep will eventually make it move further than that.
Exactly.
You'll be limited on how many times you can go on a plane a year.
They've already got a pilot carbon allowance scheme. So that happened last year, because even an Australian senator warned that we were trialling this. Government wasn't mentioned anywhere in the news or anything, but everybody will have a carbon allowance. So what's the point in that unless you're actually going to use it and flex your muscles and actually, as Basil, you said, with central digital bank currency, they can decide how much you spend, where you spend, what you spend it on, and if you're even allowed to spend it at all.
That's right.
None of us voted for that.
No.
Well, I think the Europeans are going down that road anyway. There haven't been all that many tangible benefits of Brexit, but one at least is that we're not directly under the jackboot of Ursula von der Leyen.
Yes.
As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the European Union is planning on bringing in QR coded ID in order to travel between countries. And indeed, a central bank digital currency from the European Central Bank is on the cards.
Yeah, but haven't there been talks about them actually having a €10,000 cap on how much anybody can actually have in a bank account, and also, yes, talking about limiting what you can spend, when you spend it, where you spend it, and how you spend it, or indeed if you're allowed to spend it at all. So it's one step further on than what we're looking at the moment. But
there's a catalogue of stories of people, including in the UK, who've gone into their bank to withdraw a sum of money to buy something like a car and are quizzed by the bank about what it's for, or even refuse the money until they can demonstrate that they're going to spend it on that particular purchase. I mean, goodness knows what the car dealers of the 1970s and 80s would have made of this,
Exactly. Arthur Daly would be in real trouble, wouldn't he?
We all remember the saying, cash is king.
Yeah.
But, not for much longer.
No.
Yeah. It comes to something when you go past somebody selling the big issue and they've got a Zettel card reader or whatever. It's getting crazy out there.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just worry, because it's what they allow you to know in the media is one thing. What's going on below the surface is the more worrying issue for me. And going forward, and I think I'm even in the same boat as Jeremy Clarkson. His view is that every election, each party should have a manifesto, and it should be legally binding, so that if they depart from that manifesto, immediately you have to call a general election to get electoral approval for any policy that they want to implement that wasn't in the manifesto.
Totally agree.
I don't think that's a bad idea. We could also do with some direct democracy in Britain. Why can't we all log on via our computers and vote on certain issues? But
yes, absolutely.
Until we have much better information, until we've upgraded the media so that people are better informed about key policy decisions, then those votes are not necessarily going to go the right way.
This is it. The whole ID issue is as big, if not bigger, than Brexit. And because Brexit didn't go the way they wanted it to go, we're not going to get the chance to vote for anything again. That's probably the truth of it.
Yeah, I think that's the worry.
That's about the size of it.
Mm.
So you two are big car guys. Is the march of the electric car absolutely inexorable, and we're all going to be driven around in self-driving cars like they are in San Francisco in taxis at the moment? Or has the bubble burst? Because from what I'm seeing, values of electric cars have completely cratered second-hand. Who wants to buy a second-hand electric car?
Exactly.
The battery that's dying.
Yeah, exactly. The market has been driven by government policy in terms of subsidies to people buying electric vehicles, by the car market for company cars and business, because of the advantages that using an electric vehicle presented in terms of benefiting kind taxation situation. But of course, the government's now gradually dismantling all of those things because they realise that they can't keep subsidising electric cars from now for eternity, because eventually, there isn't yet, but eventually there would be an enormous black hole in the public finances. But what I don't understand here, Basil, is that you can actually, electric cars are smart. When you plug them into the network, they automatically shake hands with the service provider and say, I'm an electric car. So there's no reason why the service provider, when it provides the energy that fills the battery, can't charge that energy out at a price commensurate with filling up a petrol or diesel car. And then you avoid all these problems about road pricing and all the rest of it, because they've paid the money, it's in the tank, they drive until it's empty again, and then the next time they charge, they get charged a similar cost to a petrol or diesel vehicle. So, there's no real problem then. There's no need for pay per mile. And it would put them on a similar status to petrol and diesel vehicles, because essentially you fill your car up, depending on how big a car you drive, how fuel efficient it is, how fast you drive, all the rest of it, you will use more fuel in a given amount of time or not. And it would be the same with an electric vehicle. So, it can be done without any recourse to any pay per mile stuff and all the human rights and the civil liberties worries that accompany that in terms of government surveillance and all the rest of it. But really, what's happened is the market's got to the point now where all of the early adopters have adopted, all the business users have adopted, and they're on like a 3 or 4 year replacement cycle. So we've now reached the point where they've got to try and attract private buyers to buy electric vehicles to get the next rise, and they're not doing it. I mean, I'm not doing it. I've got a diesel vehicle, and I shall keep that diesel vehicle now until it expires. No intention of buying an electric or even a hybrid vehicle. So,
and you might indeed expire before that diesel vehicle, Brian.
Quite, yes, conceivably at my age. I'm 71 now, so if I keep it for 10 years, and it's only done 30,000 miles, so it's it's got plenty of life left in it. But really, the other things that have happened.
As have you.
Sorry, Paul. I missed that.
So have you, sir. You've got plenty of life left in you.
But of course, the other things that are happening is that even the European Union has realised that what they are doing is opening up the market to subsidise Chinese competition, and any new car electric sales are going to be Chinese, because they're basically the Chinese government is subsidising them with subsidies to the manufacturers, and of course dirt cheap energy provided by coal power stations. So the European car industry is going down the pan very quickly, and even von der Leyen has realised that that's a recipe for disaster, and they've got to do something to stop that, which is why they're walking back from the complete cessation of sales of internal combustion engine vehicles, and now saying, oh well, 10% of the market in the future can still be an internal combustion engine vehicle as long as it uses renewable fuels, or e-fuels or whatever. Well, I don't care. You can build as many e-fuels plants as you want using presumably eventually nuclear energy to do it, because you can't use renewables. Reliably unreliable renewables don't give you baseload energy. So that's I think that's the first crack in the edifice, because I think eventually they will have to kick the can into the long grass, and we will still be driving internal combustion engine vehicles. Added to that, Donald Trump is dismantling all the subsidies on the battery electric vehicles in America, big style, and also undermining wind and solar, because as we've already seen with Spain, if you put too much of these renewables into your energy mix, you destabilize the whole grid. And of course, in Spain, the whole of Iberia fell over a 2 or 3 day period, during which 11 people who needed constant power for medical equipment or whatever, they died. So the future as envisaged by Miliband and his crazy acolytes is it's not going to materialize. And Catherine Porter, the energy experts, just produced a report basically saying if we go down this route, we will suffer significant power outages every winter. And the report's about yay thick, and she's presented it to a number of different august bodies, energy bodies, and she's now actually, I think, in America, going around doing the same talk to them as well. So this whole thing is going to come unravelled at some point very soon. And Miliband he ought to be out on his ear already, because he's I can only describe him as sort of delusionally mass formation psychotic, because he has this zealotry, this unshakable belief that renewables and all the rest of it and green energy is the way to go. Well, actually, it's not green. It's not really renewable, because you've got to use a huge hydrocarbon footprint to make them in the first place. All of the wind turbines are concrete for the masts and all the rest of it, and the infrastructure to bring the power back from the Orkneys or wherever it is, all the way back down to London, where most of it's needed, is colossally costly and hugely energy intensive. So it will fall to pieces. It's just how much damage can he do before he gets ousted?
Probably quite a lot. You said that the European Union are open to 10% of cars in the future being internal combustion engine, but surely if the public buy internal combustion engine cars, then that percentage will go up, or are they going to sort of cap the supply? And
I don't think it's a hard 10%. That's the thing. I think in their minds they think that in the future more and more people go over to electric, so they say, oh well, you can keep 10%, and the rest will just naturally follow down the battery electric vehicle route. But I'm very clear in my own mind, and if you talk to automotive experts like Barry Crampton, Jeff buys cars, McMaster as well.
McMaster,
yeah. I mean, he himself bought a Porsche Taycan, didn't he, or something? And he's been totally.
I think he's on his second.
He's less than enamored with it. I think it's the best way to put it.
I think he owns one because he hates it and he likes to talk about it. Yeah.
So
I mean, apart from anything else, it strikes me that we had. What was it about? We've now had over 125 years of continuous development of the internal combustion engine, to the point where they have become extremely efficient. You can get the same performance now out of a 2-litre car that would have taken 5 litres 50 years ago. Everything does 0 to 60 in 6 or 7 seconds. And 50 miles to the gallon, including diesels. So to bin off all those advancements in technology seems extremely stupid, if you ask me.
Very, very, very short-sighted, Basil. No question about that. And especially when they're then peddling and heavily promoting battery electric vehicles without the capacity to build them here. And even if we or Europe could build them, all of the components, the batteries, all of the minerals, the raw materials, all the rest of it, the Chinese have got first dibs on it, and they've got about 90% of the capacity. So it is an insane approach. It really is. We are just laying ourselves open, as we've done with other industries, to let the Chinese just walk in with stuff produced, subsidized, using very, very cheap energy that our industries can't compete with because of our high energy costs, because of net zero, that our economies are just swirling down the plug hole. It's
I saw a video on YouTube of a car. I think it was a Xiaomi. Is that right?
Is that a new one?
Is it a new one?
Right.
And JQ are the two that I recognise, but there's also Leap Motor and a load of others coming in now.
I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary the way I didn't think the Chinese would get into making cars, because it's, perhaps naively, we've tended to think of them as producing things that are sort of lower down the consumer food chain. But this thing is 1,500 bhp, 1,500. Costs 50 grand, and they it looks like a Ford Mondeo. It's that same sort of, all cars look the same. I'm sure you can remember.
Yeah, so jelly mold kind of thing.
Yeah, when I was about 10 years old, I like to think that I could recognize just about any car on the road. And, that was how I passed the time, was by spotting the cars, and they were all different shapes and they were all different colors as well. But, now everything's gray, everything's metallic silver or something. This thing, 50 grand, 1,500 bhp, and it was in a drag race with the most expensive, fastest Ferrari you can get, and beat it absolutely hollow. So,
the only trouble was they needed to recharge it by the time they got to the end of the drag race.
The Ferrari cost 5 million quid or something. You could have had 20 of these things for one Ferrari, and it was much faster, and you could take 4 people. So I mean, the speed with which they're going ahead in China, that's the thing, is just absolutely extraordinary.
Yes. Yeah.
And what do they think about net zero? They're not doing anything about it. They're building coal-fired power stations, 10 a week. But no, maybe not that many. But they're building them like crazy.
Certainly one a week.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the size of their landmass compared to the UK, even if there was an issue, us going down this net zero route is not going to make any difference whatsoever. It's ridiculous. No, we're just making ourselves poor for no reason.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, we have reduced our carbon footprint by offshoring our manufacturing industry. I mean, the industry that I spent 30 years in, titanium pigments, the factory, we have the factory up the northeast coast from where I live, and the company went temporarily into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and when they came out, immediately the Chinese bid for the company, and they're now crawling all over the factory in the northeast of England, presumably, certainly getting the intellectual the intellectual property, and that will all go back to China because there was proprietary plasma technology for producing. And that will now be bolted onto all the titanium pigment factories in China, and they will presumably shut this factory down in the UK, or at least only have it as a finishing factory, and bring the prime product in from China by freighter as the ores come in, and just finish it at that factory. So it's because of course that gives them a manufacturing footprint here. So it probably is more interesting for them to keep it open for that reason. But all it means is that we are exporting know-how, technology, wealth to the Chinese and pauperizing ourselves.
And let's not forget the embassy that's being built.
Oh, yeah. Well, that will probably have a direct, conduit into Starmer's, office. So you need to do this now, Comrade Starmer. Do that, Comrade Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to take issue with you, Brian, about the Comrade Starmer. He's not left wing at all. He's an authoritarian neoliberal. There's nothing remotely. there's
I
nothing
think
remotely left-wing about Starmer. But
I think that's an artificial distinction, Basil. That's the problem. People talk about far left and far right now, but ultimately, if you were a citizen under Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler, it doesn't make any practical difference. It's still authoritarian. So
no, absolutely.
I think the Overton window now is a libertarian totalitarian window, and they're at the totalitarian end, and we're at the libertarian end, and the right and left thing's irrelevant. That's my take on it anyway.
No, absolutely. I think the left-right paradigm is almost entirely redundant. The key axis these days, rather than horizontal, is vertical between those who have power, particularly the apparatus of the state and the corporate media on their side, and those who don't. So it's oppressor versus oppressed, rather than left or right, which was always
exactly. And they dress it up as stakeholder capitalism, but what it really means is big government, big technology, big pharma, all getting the maximum, screwing the maximum they can out of the private individual, the elector, without giving them any power to do anything to combat it.
Yeah, and these are people that pose, you see, as centrists. People like Starmer, or for that matter, the last Conservative, von der Leyen. This is supposed to be the sort of middle path. Or what utter garbage! You actually find people who want to preserve the status quo and maintain individual liberties outside, further, as we saw with the digital ID thing. Whether it's Corbynites or Rupert Lowites, they're the only two wings portrayed by the corporate media as far left or far right. Actually, no. For the most part, they tend to be the guardians.
Exactly. What they describe as far left or far right is actually centrist, because they are so far out into the totalitarian sort of area that everybody that they disagree with has to be at the other end of the spectrum.
That's right.
But without that sort of level of agitation, the government would get away with even more than it's getting away with anyway. So in many regards, it's best that they exist.
It's going to be very...
just to touch on the other one that I'm particularly concerned about, we mentioned building all over the green belt. I mean, I don't think any government has the right to do that. They don't own the land that we all live on. And so giving property developers and builders the right to destroy, what's left of rural England. I mean, I think at the moment, the balance between urbanization and green spaces in the UK is just about okay. I personally don't want to see much more urbanization. There are still, fortunately, even in the home counties, Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire, but parts of Berkshire, still lots of green spaces. Here in Sussex, still lots of lovely countryside in Sussex, I'm glad to say. I don't want to see that change with these hideous new towns. That's absolutely appalling idea. To house who exactly as well? Well,
yes.
The 20 million or whatever illegal immigrants that have found their way into the country one way or another in the last couple of decades, probably.
So they don't have any right to do that. And the other one is severely limiting trial by jury, which is also something that no government has the right to do. The claim, of course, as always, is convenience. There's backlog in the courts. Okay, then employ more judges. Simple as that.
And sit for longer. Use the jury system, the legal system more efficiently, because it's not used efficiently at the moment. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was in court before Christmas, and we all, we got in, I think, about 3:30, and we were concerned that the whole day's proceedings might be over and that the judge wouldn't have time to hear our case properly. Fortunately, she did. But why can't the courts be open until 10 o'clock at night? I mean, I'm not saying it has to be the same judge in the chair, but that whole process, there's all sorts of ways of speeding it up without cutting out trial by jury.
Well, that was the talk after COVID, wasn't it? That they were going to have to do that sort of system. Absolutely, yeah. What's your thoughts as well, Basil, on the cancellation of local elections?
Well, I mean, absolutely appalling. I don't know where they get the idea that they could do that from. It's just all this government overreach, all things that they just simply don't have the right to do. But once you've got your greedy mitts on the levers of power,
you don't want to relinquish it.
They're very reluctant to relinquish. And there's all sorts of things you can do, which, as we pointed out earlier, nobody voted for. So So and then what are people left to do? Well, take to the streets. Sign petitions, take to the streets. A really very limited number of ways in which people can push back against an overreaching state. I'm not someone who has been on dozens and dozens of marches. I went on one of the COVID marches at the height of that farrago when it looked like, well, all sorts of things were on the table, mandatory vaccinations and QR codes and possibly even digital ID being brought in under cover of darkness at that time. I don't know, what effect those demonstrations had other than making those of us who went on them feel a bit better. A lot of people ended up having those injections that wish they didn't because they had to keep their jobs,
I was glad I was retired because I had none of them.
What about you, Paul?
I must admit I did have them at the time, but my thoughts on them now are mixed. There's a friend of mine, his wife, ever since she had the first vaccination, her health has deteriorated massively to the point where they've not even been able to really give her a proper diagnosis of what she's got. It sort of exhibits itself as almost Lyme's disease, but it's not Lyme's disease. And she's fallen down the stairs twice in the last year, and she's gone from being relatively fit to having major, unproperly diagnosed health issues.
So that was after just one injection.
That was after the first one.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course,
try proving it. Try proving it.
Well, I mean, the medical profession, particularly big pharma, just has batten down the hatches, and of course they were given license to basically do all these injections with no sort of fear of proceedings against them. If anything went wrong, whereas the Americans are starting to unravel that now. Robert Kennedy, is it Robert? Whatever. He's unraveling it now and saying, well, actually, no, there's too much evidence of problems after these various injections, particularly the boosters, the ones that came afterwards, for the not to be a legal case to look at that and look at compensation for those who've been affected. And there are a lot of people affected.
Well, I don't watch the BBC, only ITV on demand, but from what I've seen, they've been pushing it much less hard this year, all these vaccines. I might be wrong. I mean, I just completely ignore anything like that. But you can. I don't think there's been anything like the same campaign for everybody to have injections this year.
No. I mean, there was a story about bringing back masks in hospitals and stuff like that, which, frankly,
there was a brief scare about a month or so ago, wasn't there? There was some communicable disease on the rise, but it went away as quickly as it has appeared, didn't it?
Well, it's called flu, and it happens every year, and don't bring back your stupid tests. I mean, the tests, the PCR test that they used as the excuse for telling everybody to sort of hide in the house and only come and put a periscope out every 6 months or whatever it was, was based on a test that even the guy who invented it said this test is not appropriate for the purposes being used. Kerry Mullis is dead now, of course. So they were doing sort of to get the right amount of material to actually test. They were repeating the test about 45 times, and I think Mullis and other experts said, well, if you do it more than about 20 times, I can't remember the exact numbers, but certainly they were getting to the point where they were to concentrate the sample. They reproduced it so many times that anybody or anything could get a positive result totally by random chance.
It's the old room full of chimpanzees with typewriters writing the works of Shakespeare kind of idea, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing was what the Americans call a receptacle of excrement.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a fiasco. But certainly it was clear that this was the state flexing their muscles to see what they could get away with. And of course, I'm not sure that any of that legislation has actually been repealed.
No, well, I mean, I would call it, now I saw this term used for the first time last week, and I think it's appropriate really, which is syndicate, because government and corporate media effectively act as one these days.
Yes, yes.
You know, whether it's the BBC, I mean, some people like to tell themselves that the Guardian is somehow independent or something, but the Times, the Telegraph, people still look at these things online, you know. Sky, they all take the same line. GB News has presented, you know, some different opinions, some good, some bad, you know. I mean, I think it's good that it's there, because the more media, the better, quite frankly. And the next battle that we're going to have, you know, apart from the digital ID, is over censorship. What we are allowed to say on social media, and what we're not. And you know, again, they're going to try and bring this in under the cover of child protection. In fact, that's what the so-called Online Safety Act is all about, is supposedly protecting children from the harmful effects of pornography. But again, tremendous mission creep. And well, I mean, I've seen charts, I don't know if they can be verified, showing that Britain leads the way in the number of people arrested for posting on social media, you know.
You can murder somebody, you know, and you might get out because the jails are full after, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks. But you know, if you send out a hurty tweet, you could be in there for a century.
Yeah, no, I mean, it all started with the so-called hate speech legislation. How can you legislate against human emotion, and one which we all feel? So, you know, that was the thin end of the wedge.
Yes. And,
you know, the sooner it's repealed, the better. But we've got an enormous amount of terrible legislation on the books in Britain. You know, it would be great to see an enormous amount of it repealed. But I don't know if that will happen in my lifetime.
Well, I wonder if we go back and we just say repeal the European Communities Act of 1972, whether the whole damn lot just comes crumbling down. And then, of course, if you do that, then you repeal the Climate Change Act and the legislation or the net zero legislation. Those three, and I think a lot of the stinking edifice that we've got at the moment would just collapse in a heap. And then you just start rebuilding again from there.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, the next election promises to be, you know, quite unique, because for the first time in over 100 years, or nearly 100 years, whatever, there's the prospect of somebody other than the established parties forming the government. Whether that's reform or some sort of green/your party alliance, because there are pretty much as many people on the left who are as disenchanted with the system that we've had as there are on the right. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a real battle of ideas, the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's hope we're not all in irons in, you know, Pentonville or somewhere by the time that happens.
Well, we have to remain optimistic. It's not always easy, but optimism is a choice, you know.
Yes.
I see a lot of people who allow world events and current affairs to get them down personally, internally. And you have to be able to keep these things at arm's length and deal with them with a sense of engaged detachment.
Absolutely, and
the sake of your own health and sanity.
A keen appreciation of the absurd as well, Basil.
Yeah. Although, having said that, there are some extremely sinister forces at work on this planet.
Absolutely, I agree entirely. Yeah,
we ourselves otherwise, you know.
Yeah, maybe that's a source for another program with the three of us later.
Absolutely. That's been brilliant, Basil. Thanks ever so much for
it's been
coming
really
on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
We've covered quite a few topics, so thanks again for coming on, and I'm sure we'll have you back in the future too, or you can invite us as the case may be.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been nice to go on to your show too. Thank you.
Do either of you know anything about motor racing?
I used to follow Formula One.
I don't follow it as closely as I used to because I find the rules are getting so arcane now that the tyre strategy and the refueling and all the rest of it actually turns it into less of a race and more of a procession.
Yeah, it's become very, very technical at the Formula One level.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what they could do about that. They could just say, look, no more tyre changes. Period. Do you know what I mean? You just, all the manufacturers would have to change the formulas, but you get one set of tyres and that's it. You have a race. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it was more interesting in the sort of mid-90s where they had a choice of tyres as well. So it was more
that sort of era, even when Damon Hill was driving, it was more interesting than now because the car technology is such that one manufacturer, it's been Red Bull up until recently, seems to be McLaren a bit more now. Ferrari have fallen back down the pack. And so much of what happens, if your car is not right up at the top of the performance envelope, all the tyre stuff and the safety cars and all the rest of it just means you got no chance really.
I believe Cadillac are joining in this year for the first time. Cadillac are joining. But I've got a great friend that follows it very closely, or used to, and he said that the main problem with it is that there are far fewer fatalities. People found it much more exciting in the 50s, 60s, and 70s because the drivers were daredevils, and you took your life in your hands every time you went out. Now it's all much too safe. I don't think the drivers feel that way.
I just wish they'd go back to actually having a proper race and not all this pit strategy and tyre changes and all the rest of it, which doesn't help the engagement. It's a bit like VAR in football. It causes more problems than it actually solves.
Absolutely. Well, together with the sort of new circuits that Formula One goes on in Abu Dhabi and in China and places like that, the whole thing has started to look like CGI. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Shiny, the circuits are immaculate. The whole thing looks with when you're in Monaco, but the rest of them you could be in a video game.
Well exactly. I've just helped my son to rebuild his PC, and he's got all these racing games on it. And when you play them, as you say, Basil, you think, well, this looks like reality, or vice versa. It really does. You find it hard to tell the difference whether it's a racing game or the real thing.
Well, that's another whole can of worms. AI, isn't it? My God.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the speed with which that is changing so many jobs, industries, processes, and as you say, what we see online. I find them hilarious. There's a whole slew these days of short videos of anthropomorphized cats doing things cats could never do, working in restaurants or cooking, and they're very funny because they usually end with the cat sort of going berserk and behaving, suddenly flipping out and behaving like a cat usually does.
But there's no real danger to those ones, is there? Because obviously we know that that's not real. But it's when you see a speech by a leading politician or a world leader that could potentially have been generated by AI that could trigger some major incident. That's the worrying thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw a thing, what looked like a news item, proper news item, about a patient in an American hospital who ran out into the street in the operating gown because he thought that they were going to try and steal his organs. And then this led to a raid on the hospital and doctors being arrested who were stealing organs and uncovering unlicensed medical fridges. I know it looks like the whole thing was completely made up. You have to ask yourself, why would somebody do that just for clicks? Because of course clicks equal money these days.
But that does undermine, if it needed any more, undermine the confidence in the medical profession and pharma industry if you put stuff like that out.
Yeah. So well, that's a subject for another time.
It
The
is, yeah.
battle, you could call it the battle for reality. What's
Yes.
real?
Yeah, it is. It is a
Yeah.
battle for reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the case with everything we've been talking about.
That's a good title for our next episode, Basil. Battle for
Oh,
reality.
that's copyrighted, that one. You can forget it.
Brilliant.
All right.
Well, we'll see you again, Basil.
Cheers, Basil.
Thank you.
Thanks much indeed. Cheers.